there's all these kind of expectations that society puts on us and things that we put on ourselves from the kind of voices that we've heard over the years. And it's amazing, like if you meditate and sit quietly, the voices that will seep in and you'll go, oh, that's interesting. Where's that voice come from? You're not good at this. You're not going to be able to do that. You should do this. You should do that. And I found that the last couple of years, I've managed to sort of shake those all off. And so what's quite sad about it is that I've realized that for most of my adult life, I have not really known who I am and not allowed myself to embrace who I am and fully enjoy and love who I am.
Hello and welcome to Good Journeys with Second Mountain, the podcast series that shines a spotlight on inspiring people and their inspired stories. I'm your host for the show, Ben Veal, the founder of Second Mountain, meaningful comms for a brave new world. You can join in the conversation with us on social media using the hashtag GoodJourneysPod, and you can also find each and every single episode in full over at our YouTube channel. Just search for @Second Mountain Comms on YouTube and at Instagram. Joining me for today's show is my very special guest and someone I'm delighted to have on the Good Journeys pod, Katy Cowan. Katy Cowan is the founding editor of Creative Boom, a fantastic online magazine dedicated to the creative industries. A highly respected and internationally regarded media platform, Creative Boom now reaches over 1 million people each and every month and serves as a valued community space for artists and designers around the world to unite and celebrate creative excellence together. A trained journalist, Katy is now also putting her natural talent for storytelling and conversation to great use as the host of the Creative Boom podcast, where she interviews a diverse array of fascinating creative individuals about their personal journeys. Katy, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me. This is really nice to be asked, actually, because, yeah.
I was going to say, is it nice to be on the other side of the podcast for once?
A little bit, yeah, also terrifying, but yeah, I mean, you'll know yourself, it's quite nice doing podcasts because you can hide behind, you don't have to sort of contribute too much of yourself. You can sort of just let the other person do all the hard work, but yeah. So
absolutely. I'll make you do lots of hard work today. That's good. I just have the easy job of sitting back and asking questions.
Well, yeah. And even that's really kind of hard work, isn't it? Finding the right questions to ask people. It's tough.
Yeah, it is, but it's also the fun. It's what I've loved about this process so far, is really kind of getting to know people, getting to know their stories, and kind of really looking into the journeys they've been on. And you're someone that I've, kind of known for a while now, respected greatly for work you do. You gave me a huge amount of support 10 plus years ago when I was starting out with kind of the world of freelance journalism, continue to do so now with my kind of purpose-driven consultancy. But for those people that aren't familiar with Creative Boom and what you do, can we kick off with how you would describe Creative Boom to someone that's never checked out the magazine before? And I guess what I'm most interested in is what's the purpose behind Creative Boom?
Yeah, sure. Well, it's a good question. And quite interestingly, it's something that I'm always trying to figure out. That doesn't sort of offer a huge amount of confidence in what I'm about to say, but I feel like it's good to have that kind of approach and it also sums up what Creative Boom has been to me over 13 years. It's a kind of living, breathing thing that is always evolving and always changing. But if I could sum up what it is right now, I would say it's an online platform, ultimately a magazine, a podcast, and a community that's designed to celebrate, inspire, and support the creative industries. And when I talk about the creative industries, I talk about graphic design, illustration, photography, art, all those things, predominantly around visual communications and the creative professionals that work in those areas. But we do kind of cover a much broader range too, because as you know, creativity isn't sort of confined to a box. It can sort of go everywhere and anywhere. So yeah, it's my baby and an absolute passion And it was something that I started 13 years ago, basically because I looked around following the global economic crisis at all my lovely creative friends and realized a lot of us were suffering, didn't know how to get work. Not, a few of my mates didn't know how to do PR and marketing. So I thought, you know what, let's do something positive. Let's give back and let's share some of the things I've learned about PR and marketing, create my own magazine, and we'll just see what happens. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what really interests me. I mean, how did that idea kind of first come to you? Where do you begin with that journey?
Yeah, I mean, I'm the sort of person who, and a lot of my best friends will tell you this, I'm the sort of person who gets an idea and then just goes, okay, I'm going to do that. I don't really sort of overthink it. I just say, do you know what? That's a really nice idea. I'll just do it. I was having a conversation with one of my team this morning and came up with an idea. And they just very gently said, it's okay if you sleep on this, Katy, and just give it a bit of time to breathe. And I was howling with laughter because this person's been working with me for nearly 2 years now and clearly know me too well. I've been trying to sort of hide this crazy side of myself, but it's obvious that that's the way I am. So to put it bluntly, it was the year 2009. I just got married to my lovely husband Tom. We were skint. We were living in Stoke-on-Trent, where we both grew up. And I'd just sort of a couple of years earlier gone freelance. And I couldn't believe how easy it had been for me to go freelance in the world of PR, because I'd made a few contacts and I immediately got some work and it was all going really, really well. And unfortunately, all my clients were in the property sector. So literally overnight, they all just disappeared, bar one. So I think I was getting paid something like £400 a month from one client. I think my day rate back then was £200. And I was, they were just hanging on by a thread. And this all kind of happened in this very expensive year of getting married and all the rest of it. So we were on honeymoon. My husband had said, maybe you got to think about going and getting a job again. And I was like, oh, God, I don't really want to do that. And we were on honeymoon. And we all get this, right? When you have time to get away from your real life, your ordinary life, you'll just be sort of lying on a sunbed with a book or dozing in the sunshine if you're lucky enough. And suddenly you'll sit bolt upright, which is exactly what I did. And I literally just turned to my husband, Tom, who was deep into some sort of, computer coding book or something in weirdo. And I said, when I get home, I want to start a blog. And it's going to be about art and design. And it's going to support creatives. And I'm going to call it Creative Boom, because it's going to create an industry boom. And we're going to get the creative industries booming again. And Tom just sort of looked at me and went, all right, because he knows me very well. Okay, we'll do that. I'll get you up and running on something like WordPress and we'll sort it out. You're allowed to sort of relax now. And I'm like, all right, okay. And he knows as well as I do. I kind of sit back down, leave him to it and let him relax and not think about work. And I'm sort of sat there going, plan. What am I going to do? So I got home and I had a really nice chap. I think he was called Mike Messina, a freelance designer in Stoke. I think it was Mike Messina. I don't know how that name has just bubbled back up because I was racking my brains thinking who did our first logo. And
Mike, if you're out there, we want to hear from you.
Yeah, Mike Messina, he was great. He was absolutely great. And it was just this lovely little bubble with his very kind of raw and handwritten typography, Creative Boom in a speech bubble in a lovely sort of bright blue. And I had all these kind of grand ideas of having a very bespoke website. And then my lovely husband, Tom, sat me down and said, okay, well, if we do a bespoke website, it's going to be a lot of work. So why don't we instead take that logo and we'll put it on a WordPress theme, go and have a look at some themes, come back and we'll get it all set up. And literally within 2 weeks, I had something up and running with this lovely logo. And I had all this time because I didn't have any PR clients. I had one and just got going really. And it was very sweet and innocent. And it was like, here's Ben. He works in PR. Here's his recent project. go take a look. And then it just grew and it grew. And it was like a kind of visual representation of my crazy brain on a screen, you know, all these things that I wanted to do, like a news section, an inspiration section. We had a directory, and then like the themes got more and more complicated, and we added like hubs all over the UK. And, you know, it was just this monster that grew and grew and grew really, really fast. And all the while I was growing my PR business. So it was a crazy time.
I was looked from the outside in and thought, how is she doing this? Because, you know, you essentially extended this opportunity to the entire creative industry and said, hi, I've got a website. It looks beautiful and I'm happy to showcase your work. And I'm not going to charge you for it. And I'm going to promote you really well. And I'm going to do it with journalistic integrity. And it's going to be really nice, produced features that you can be proud of. And, you know, obviously for someone like myself at the stage I was at, this was when I was launching the Science Lifestyle magazine I worked on with my friends, Dr. Stuart Faramond and Sarah Joy, who I have to name drop because they're wonderful. And it was great for us because we just launched this publication. We didn't have funds behind us. And there with Creative Boom, and he gave us some wonderful coverage of it. And that really helped to kind of elevate us and legitimize it. But all the time I'm there thinking, how are you running this? How are you? And as you've grown over the years, I've kind of watched in awe as, you know, the site's incredible. It's kind of one of my very few kind of go-to places that I always spend time online. But
that's really nice.
It's a beast now, really, isn't it? What you've got in a good way.
Well, a controlled beast, but it's taken 13 years to get there. I remember back in the early days on a Sunday morning at 2 a.m, Tom would sort of lean over the banister from upstairs and call down and say, are you going to come to bed? You can leave that website alone. And I couldn't. I was just constantly on there. You know, I built a big following on Twitter in the very early days, and I was just working every evening, every weekend, just absolutely poured my heart and soul into it until I damaged my hand, stopped working. And I had to go and have an operation.
Oh, wow.
That was ridiculous. I'm not by any stretch promoting, you know, hard work or working stupid hours, or suggesting for a minute that was partly due to where it is now. But I was stupid, and I did sort of go in and have my kind of operation on my nerves in my elbow, which is quite common apparently. And managed to walk out and sort of say, okay, something has to change. But hard work and not being afraid to change and not being afraid to try new things has kind of ultimately been the recipe, I think, for where we've got to now. But back then, I mean, my kind of ideas and where I'd take it just turned it into a huge monster. That at one point we just, you know, when we realized we had so much traffic coming in, sat down with Tom and said, look, I think we need to take this more seriously. It's not just a sort of little passion project anymore. It's actually something that I could viably end up doing full time one day. And I think I realized quite early on that as much as I loved PR, really I was more a journalist, and I loved being immersed in that creative world. I mean, there's only so many press releases you can write for a property developer before you realize that actually your soul needs to be nourished elsewhere. Yes. So without putting down the wonderful industry that is PR, because I may well go back to it one day, you know, I never close a door fully. It's just when you kind of start something like Creative Boom, and it's this sort of wonderful passion project that you don't have to overthink. You can just do whatever you want with it. You can test things out. You can change things. You can add to it. You can take things away. It just becomes this beautiful kind of way to, you know, spend your time. And if I was always saying to Tom, I believe in this. I believe that one day this will be my venture. This will be my thing. I will be running this like a business. But then, you know, it was always going to be a challenge as you know, because as soon as the internet came in, it massively impacted traditional media as we know it. And you and I have both seen over our careers that impact, the change that digital has brought to our respective careers. So how was I going to start something that kind of stuck a finger up to all of that and say, well, actually, I'm going to do all this for free and sacrifice my time and probably sometimes make myself a bit ill doing it. How can I now sort of actually say, well, actually, I'm just like the rest of them. I need to make money, but without kind of bombarding people with advertising, without like asking everybody to cough up. That is the massive challenge we face on a daily basis.
One thing that I've always thought about you is that you seem to really kind of embody kind of a bit of a kind of pay it forward ethos, really. Like you really want to help others and help, just help the creative industry at large. Do you struggle to say no to people, or has that become easier with time?
It's become easier since the pandemic. I think, like with anyone, the pandemic allowed me some time to really sort of step back and think about my life, how I was working, how I was operating, whether anything could positively change. In fact, it was in early 2021 that I went full-time on Creative Boom and let my last PR client go. I could have done this years ago, but I'd been clinging on to this kind of PR aspect, my PR business, which has since evolved and become a software firm.
Is that because you still saw PR as being quite a big part of your identity, or was it that risk factor that you didn't feel that you could fully make Creative Boom your entire life?
Yeah, it was. I think it was the risk factor. I was worried that I wasn't going to be able to make it work. And ironically, the thing that helped turn it around made me realize, partly with the pandemic and realizing, gosh, we're only here once. What am I doing? Just go for it. And obviously with the support of my husband, who's amazing, he was like, just go for it. And don't get me wrong, I haven't gone from zero to a viable turnover. It's been growing naturally for many, many years. It's just, I don't think PR was part of my identity. I'm trying to think how to sort of explain this. I think, sorry, what was the question again? It's such a complicated subject for me because I'm still going through the process myself of trying to figure out what I am now, which has been a lot of what my journey is. It's why I'm wearing a bright pink t-shirt. It's why I
think we all are. I mean, you were touching on PR and saying about, the repetition and mundanity of the press release, which we all relate to, any of us who've spent years and years in PR. But actually, how often do I craft press releases now? Very, very rarely.
Yeah,
I'm a creative content producer. I'm a strategic consultant. I'm a podcast host. I think communicators these days wear many hats, and especially since the influx of digital, and then since COVID, the whole arena's changed really. And I don't think anyone who's just traditionally, can't just be a writer without having really good social skills.
Yeah.
You can't just be a pure PR and a media pitcher without understanding how that's going to play digitally. So I think we're all kind of facing, all of us in communications and journalism are facing a bit of a identity crisis and trying to work out what we are. And I just say I'm a communicator, and I would say you're a communicator as well. It's just there's many different strands to, or a storyteller. There's just different strands to how you do that. My question, I believe, was that kind of letting go of, make it. I'm always interested in how, when people make the jump to complete a venture, because I made the jump to setting up Second Mountain predominantly out of circumstance following redundancy, but also there were easier ways for me to navigate redundancy during COVID than setting up my own business. It served as the catalyst for me to go, Ben, you've been wanting to do this for 10 years. You've finally been offered an opportunity, as in you are not employed currently. You can either go back to a senior PR role somewhere and do a role that you're not particularly happy doing and working in a way that it doesn't really work with your lifestyle,
Yeah.
or give it a go. And much like you, I think because it was in COVID, it was a lot easier to take a risk. And probably much like you and how you're describing with your holiday with, you know, with Tom and coming out of Creative Beam and getting on with it. I mean, it drives my wife wild because, you know, I remember I was on a family walk and I just went, Second Mountain. That's the company name. Second Mountain.
Great name.
And she was like, really? I was like, yep, that's the name. I'll find it. And that's happening. And, you know, brand developed within 2 weeks, proposition, website out within a month, you know, and I'm like you. I think, you know, you create and then you evolve. I created a foundation. I'm sure Second Mountain and what I do will look very different in 10 years' time to what it did in 2020. But it's all about foundations. And so Creative Beam, you've got this in an era, I think, where things come and go so quickly and life is so unstable. I think the very fact that Creative Beam is here almost celebrating 15 years now, and you stayed very true to your vision and integrity to it, I think you should be fiercely proud of that, Katy.
Well, I've only allowed myself that luxury in recent years, actually, because I've very much just got my head down and worked and haven't really thought about that side of things, and sort of put my heart and soul into both my PR business for many years. I mean, I was a co-founder of that company for 11 and a half years. We very successfully are still working with the same clients that I've said goodbye to. So that's something I'm hugely proud of. But yeah, I am allowing myself, without thinking it's an egotistical thing or, you know, because that's not what it is. It's just allowing myself to be proud of what I've achieved, because it's all good and well, isn't it? In hindsight, you can look back and you can see all of the pain and suffering you went through and all the kind of mistakes you made and the glorious wins, and the very thing that you've got to now. Creative Boom as well for me has changed massively in what it means to me over the years. So it started off as a little hobby just to keep me sane. So when I was doing my PR work, which paid the bills, I could do something nice. I could give back. I could do something that I was really passionate about. Then it kind of became something else. It almost for a while became a testing ground for my PR clients, trying out new things as we all adapted and grew with social media and the changing digital landscape. So that was really nice. And it was also a really nice thing for a while that allowed me to provide work experience for young journalists coming out of university. So it's had all these lovely chapters. The chapter now, I'd say, well, the previous chapter, I think, started in 2017 when I realized, actually, I think this can be a viable professional magazine rather than a little kind of like side project. Let's do a redesign, which is the design you see today with the friendly sort of moving eyes. Let's do a redesign and really sort of make a go at this. So that was like a big chapter, I would say, that's happened. The new chapter, which I think began in early 2021, when I gave up PR entirely and focused purely on this, was that, you know, it's incredible. The thing I've learned over the last couple of years is that if you dedicate yourself to just one thing, you are going to see the rewards so much. Because I always had my head here and my head there. So I could never fully, you know, I was mainly looking after PR clients and staff and running an office, and I was very, very busy. So I'm amazed that I've carried Creative Beam on throughout that time. I mean, I almost gave it away a couple of times. I almost gave up completely, but there's something in you that keeps it going. So your question about what it means to me and what the mission behind it is, I think selfishly, it's so that I can do something I love for a living and do something meaningful with my life, other than like helping, you know, a big developer sell homes in Warwickshire or wherever, which is fine. Some people get great meaning from that. That's not me sort of putting that down. But just for me personally, I prefer the joy of writing about an artist who hasn't had any coverage elsewhere, because I know from a PR point of view how frustrating it is to have a client that you can't get into those big magazines, because if they're trade magazines, you have to pay for it. If they're big national newspapers, there's got to be some like really interesting hook which is not always easy when there's not a lot going on with your client. Or, you know, with the industry magazines, sometimes it's about having the right kind of level of fame behind you, you know. So for me, if I can like raise someone up and give them that kind of platform and give them that chance, that is just glorious. I absolutely love what I do for a living, and I don't know how many people can say that. It's not all fun and games. Some days I have really tough challenges, and I'm always worried about what's happening next. And there's this sort of anxiety that follows you around sometimes. I mean, actually, to be fair, since the pandemic, I think my confidence has just soared. I'm worried that I'll become overconfident now, but it's just so nice to have confidence in what I'm doing, what my passion is, what my platform's about, who I'm talking to. These are all things that don't come overnight. They are things that come about from 13 years of figuring things out, pain and suffering. It's not like a bolt upright on your sunbed, right, I'm going to do this. It's all these like years of figuring out what's the next step. I think I kind of enjoy the process as well. I don't kind of think too much about the end result. I'm just really thoroughly enjoying making it better. What can I do next? What's next? It's just a joy.
Yeah, and it's probably that inherent joy in it and passion for it that you still got, which is why it's been successful. Because if you got into it in 2009 saying, right, I'm going to give up PR, I'm going to launch Creative Boom, this is going to be my new business, I'm going to monetize it, I'm going to charge for placed opinion pieces, I'm going to charge for advertising, this is going to replace my salary, and this is going to be my business, you wouldn't have that heart and soul, which is inherent within, which is now why I would imagine you are able to build commercial partnerships of value, because there's so much goodwill and such a strong reputation for the publication.
That's what we both talk about, you know, when we're making dinner. Sometimes we talk about how like actually all those years of doing something altruistically without ever thinking of, you know, making money from it one day has probably been, you know, a big chunk of the reason why it's been a success. But then that presents a new problem. How do you turn something into something so kind of free and open into something that actually has to sort of pay several people a salary, and turn it into a business? So it's like finding that balance. What I find really interesting at the moment is, you know, as a publication, I mean, I'm very lean and mean. I haven't got huge overheads. I don't have a central office. I don't have a huge staff. What I kind of think of is, how do these other sort of publications survive when, you know, people are just so fed up with advertising and pop-ups and surveys. Everybody's digitally exhausted, aren't they? So I have the luxury of being able to keep Creative Boom, because my costs are so low, very, very kind of ad-free. There are adverts on there by all means, but we're very strict about what goes on there, and that it has to add value to the audience.
Yeah, I'm really interested in asking you about that. So this idea of digital exhaustion, I think one of the reasons that Creative Boom is such a quality product, in my opinion, is because actually it's very minimalist in terms of not just design and feel, but also content, in terms of there's a very clear kind of quality remit to what you put out, and a lot of time that goes into it. As editor, what's your process? What to you is a really good story or feature?
It's a good question. And again, it's a gut reaction, really. There are several things at play when we're looking at all the kind of press releases that come in, all the stories. First of all, we just always think about the audience. And in my mind, I think my audience are obviously creative professionals, but if they're coming to Creative Boom, it's because they know that it's a safe space. It's not a kind of, there's never going to be anything angry on there. I steer clear of anything too political. I try and keep it like, so that it sounds so twee, but like a warm embrace, you know? So if people come on there, they're not like, oh God, it's that so-and-so again. Or, oh, you know, it's that big agency again. We are always trying to have a very good balance of emerging, which is our kind of like the reason why we started in the first place, with those big names. And we do turn down like some press releases, some big stories that come out from big agencies. We do sort of say, well, actually, we covered that other story the other week. So editorially, we don't really look at what other magazines and platforms in our industry are doing to keep up with it. And I think that's one of our strengths, because we pick out what we think will resonate with our audience, what they'll get inspiration from, and we go from there. We don't always get it right. Sometimes we miss out on some great stories because our inbox is just, constantly filling up, as you can imagine. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's always having that audience member in mind. And I weirdly, I've never done customer personas or anything like that. Obviously, we do surveys. Obviously, we've got some basic analytics. We don't use Google Analytics. We use Plausible, which is privacy focused. We have very minimal. We don't know whether you're male or female. We don't know whether you're, where you're going next. We just have very basic information, unique visitors, location in terms of country, and all the rest of it. Just enough to give us a good idea of, where we're going right, where we're going wrong, and to provide the advertisers. Interestingly, our advertisers very much respect our stance on privacy, so that's great. So in my mind, based on all of that information, I don't know why, but I have a female illustrator. She's called something like Charlotte. She's in her sort of mid-30s, and she's always on a sort of tablet drawing. And so she's always in my mind. And then there's a designer working in a studio in Manchester. Let's call him Graham. And I'm just thinking, what would they want? Because they're all working daily. And this is the interesting thing about our traffic. It used to be mostly desktop. Kind of is still, actually. And people keep their tabs open, I assume, because we've always got tons of people on the site all day. And so it's like and the feedback I've got over 13 years is that people go on it on a Monday morning with a cup of tea before anything else, just to sort of get them in the mood for the day. And then they'll sort of like keep the tab open, come back to it if they want to, or go in through social media, and they'll carry on and do their work. So with those people in mind, I just don't want to like add any anxiety to their hard work, their hardworking day. If we provide news, it's going to be mainly positive, and it's going to be mainly inspirational.
Well, Ben from Wiltshire, when he checks it out, is generally mid-morning, having gotten my big rocks first task out of the way, which is what my business coach always says. Worst thing first. It's usually what I do with a cuppa. Just pop in and see what's happening on Creative Beam. And as you say, because I know it's going to be, 5-10 minutes, there'll always be something interesting. There'll be something maybe that I haven't thought about before. There'll be an interesting personality, a bit of creativity, something visual. There's just always something that's, it's as you say, it's a nice, encouraging space to go. It's going to fuel my mind creatively, but it's not going to make me angry like if I spent about 5 minutes on Twitter or on BBC, which brings me nicely on. I really want to get onto Twitter with you, because this fascinates me, because I know, especially in the early days, but throughout, that social media has been a huge thing, both for you and for Creative Beam. You've got this massive community on social now, but it's your relationship personally with social media that fascinates me, because about a year ago, you very publicly unfollowed everyone on Twitter and told everyone you were unfollowing them on Twitter, and you have remained doing so to this day. So I really want to know, I think that's really brave and obviously very countercultural. I'm really interested to know kind of what was behind that.
Yeah.
Why you made the decision, why you, and also why you announced it, what that reaction was like, and how it's been since, the whole unfollowing story, Katy.
Okay, I'm going to do my best. So basically, I found myself during the pandemic going back to the early days of Creative Beam, staying up until midnight every night, chatting with people on social media. And then I got to a point where I was so burnt out, because actually I know a lot of people were on furlough. and so I kind of got some time out. I don't know what they were doing, but I worked even harder and was just working longer days because for some reason I felt it was my kind of duty to sort of do all I could to support the creative industries. I mean, we set up a forum as soon as it was announced that we were, remember those old forums? Set that up,
Yeah.
and about 1,800 people went on there. And
Wow.
that stayed up for about a year where people chatted with each other. And so I was
As
managing.
like a kind of networking and
Yeah.
referral hub
Well, we were
and
all just
support hub.
shocked, weren't we? It was just
Mm.
awful. And I said to Tom, I said, oh, I really want to do something more. What can I do? And it was really nice actually, because it went back to that very authentic, 2009, feel where it felt like we were all coming together on things like Twitter and Facebook, and we were all supporting each other, and it felt really, really lovely. But then I got to kind of the end of 2021 and realized that I was having 200 ongoing conversations with different artists and designers just in my Instagram feed. That's not including what was going on in my LinkedIn, my Twitter DMs, my emails. And my goodness, it's lovely to be able to help and offer support to people and be there for them. And weirdly, that's one of the things that has come out of Creative Boom for me. People feel like they know me and they can just sort of approach me and share things with me. I don't know why that's the case. I don't know whether it's the little eyes or whether the kind of my personality and who I am resonates across everything that Creative Boom is. I do not know. But
I think it's because if I can just interject with it, I think it's because there's an authenticity and quite a realness to how you put yourself across, how you talk about yourself online, the content you share on social. I like to think I'm pretty similar. I think people get a sense of who you are without having ever had a face-to-face conversation with you.
Yeah, and it's really sort of lovely to be able to help people. But I think I just got to a point where I realized I was neglecting myself, which is not good. So I finally, at the age of 43 last year, learned the value of saying no. And it was all kind of accumulating with this. I'd kind of, I know it sounds absurd. I had some counseling last year. I'd kind of found myself. I had about 8 sessions of counseling with this amazing woman just on the phone, never saw her face, which was very liberating. And figured out so much stuff that it just it kind of like undid me, and in a really positive way. And ever since, I've just been, I don't know, like almost sort of falling in love with myself, like kind of getting to know who I am, what I like. For the first time in my life, I'm wearing rings. I figured out what colors suit me best, and this is why I'm wearing bright pink. I've never worn bright pink before. I'm going off on one, but my point is, I just kind of thought, you know what, I don't need to do this anymore. And I think, in a sense, if I'm really honest with myself, the practice of giving back and supporting others was probably a way of kind of, making myself happy. Yeah, granted, but also maybe it goes a bit deeper than that, which I'm still trying to figure out. I mean, I come from a very caring family. My nana was a nun before she met my grandpa.
Wow. Okay.
So we grew up with this kind of ethos that you help and you give back. So, we always volunteered and we always did things for charity at Christmas and all this kind of stuff. So that's just part of the fabric of who I am. But when you get that, unfortunately, and I think my nana was the same because she was always doing things in the community, you find it really hard to say no, because you care so much about other people and you want them to do well and you want to be there for them. So me unfollowing everyone on Twitter was part of a wider process of me deleting my personal Instagram, sorting out various controls on other platforms, and saying, do you know what? If people need to get in touch with me, they need to email me, because I cannot cope with all these different things going on anymore. So there was that one aspect. The other aspect was privacy. I suddenly had a freak out when I read an article about everything you've ever tweeted is out there constantly. And someone at any time can come along without any context and take something you tweeted in 2009 and suggest something awful about yourself. And obviously, I've never tweeted anything other than, rainbows and fluffy kittens, but it freaked me out. So I went through this whole process of de-Googling myself, de-digitalizing myself, taking myself off Twitter, and just trying to gain back some control, which is, by the way, it's now completely out of control. We're all online. You can do many things to take yourself off there, but it's the cat's out of the bag. You can't reel it back as much as you'd like, but you can take some steps to sort of feel like you've got a handle on everything. So unfollowing everyone, insulting everybody at the same time, great fun. I now follow lists instead. And I suppose if we're talking about managing your personal time and saying no, gaining back some privacy and control, I think the third reason why I did all that was because now when I click on my home feed, there's nothing there. There's nobody falling out with each other. There's no politics. There's no like nastiness. There's no reminder of some awful graphic designer who sent you a kind of, 3-page email once telling you how rubbish you are and why Creative Boom's going to fail. And, you can just completely switch yourself off really kind of positively from any negativity and just instead go on your lists and see from all the lovely people that you follow what they're up to. And if anybody's been can I swear?
Of course you can.
Anyone's been a dick, then you can just take them off your list. They won't know that you did it.
Yeah.
They don't care anyway, but it's glorious. So that's kind of why I insulted everyone.
That does sound idyllic in many ways. And how did you say you insulted everyone? But actually, I mean, it's your own personal choice. Did you get a backlash to doing it?
No, not at all. I think a few people unfollowed me because, whether through, stop following me. How dare she? What an egotist.
I won't follow her.
Yeah. Or more likely they have these kind of automated systems set up where if somebody unfollows you, you unfollow, all that old school stuff from maybe 6 years ago that we all signed up to. Yeah, mainly people sent me an email, said, Katy, I'm amazed at what you've done. It's really inspired me. I'm going to read Cal Newport's book and watch that video you recommended and all the rest of it. So, mainly positive.
So do you enjoy social media more now than you were?
Yeah. Love it. I don't like Instagram. I had a personal Instagram account for a while and I found myself falling into bad behaviors. So it's so easy as a girl to sort of go, ooh, pretty, like, oh, look at all these lovely kind of products and stuff and these brands. And I'd be obsessing about getting a new top or buying some new trainers. There's a really nice Instagram account called Sneaker Sheep. I think it's Sneaker Sheep. And he shares nothing but it's like a shot of his sneakers every day from his doorstep in Amsterdam. I think it's Amsterdam. Could be Antwerp, somewhere like that. And then he shoots, so you never see his face, and then he shoots from his waist down. And that sparked the most ridiculous obsession with Nikes and buying like too many Nikes. Like, I mean, given that we didn't go on holiday during that time, we just had, a bit of spare money, more than usual. Oh, just buy some more trainers. So, and also it just makes you a bit anxious because you see other people going out and then you think, oh, why wasn't I invited? I mean, you're in your 40s, but you're still human. You still get that FOMO, I
mean, I found you were talking about the kind of tribal community mentality of the early stages of the pandemic. And when I'm talking about that, I'm talking maybe March to July 2020, that very brief, very tight first bit where it was a novelty. The one plus side I found to that was the FOMO was gone because, I was at home with a 18-month-old. I mean, pandemic or no pandemic, we weren't going out much. But suddenly all of my peers and everyone I'd follow on social work didn't have a life either. And it was quite liberating for a bit, actually.
Wasn't it?
And then it felt like it's all gone into overdrive now and everyone's just catching up on every experience they can. But for a brief period, it was nice.
It feels nuts. It really does. And I think I mainly deleted Instagram because I thought, what am I doing? Why am I sharing pictures of my life? Me dancing in the kitchen. It's ridiculous. But I kind of liked it because you got to see other people's lives and you got to sort of have a connection. But then I read something somewhere that actually these aren't real interactions. They're not actually real. So I kind of deleted it. And I made a mission to, once a week, ring an old friend, call them up, do a video FaceTime, or go and see them and have a pint with them. And I've stuck by that since. And I have to say, it's coming up to a year since I did all this. And my friendships have definitely become stronger, more enriched. I'm talking about 4 or 5 people in my life who I love dearly. And I just really make an effort with them. So rather than having, all this, and I'm not suggesting that they're superficial, because those conversations and those connections that I made during the pandemic were nourishing. They helped me as much as I tried to help them. And if I bumped into any of them, I would be delighted and give them a massive hug. I'm a hugger. I'd say, can we have a hug first? Because, that's very
good, yeah.
That's the way to do it. Yeah. And I would be delighted to see them. But I realized that actually by spending a lot of time and energy on those, I was sort of maybe not spending enough time with the people who I'm really close with. And really, as well as I do, that it's the close friendships and family that really, really matter.
Yeah, and I'm a big believer in the fact that I think most of us have only really got the ability to have 5 really good friends. That you can have many, many, many friends and acquaintances, and you can have thousands of followers. But I really think to have, those really deep, enriching, lifelong friendships where you really weather the storms and go through the peaks and valleys of life together. You've only really got the capacity to do that with a few people.
Yeah.
And that for
It's
me
true.
was much like you. That for me during lockdown, that was when I really doubled down on a few very old and quite lapsed friendships, and we put a lot of time into virtual meets, which then turned into being together again when we were able to. And they're friendships that hadn't had anywhere near enough love or attention in the previous few years when work had dominated.
I think
I'm still hanging on to a lot of lockdown learnings. I think I'm still feeling a sense of nostalgia for some of that time, because as awful as it was in many, many respects, and I did not weather it well, I'll be the first to admit, but the simplicity of the time really appealed to me as someone who genuinely quite likes routine and order and things to be in their place. The simplicity and the pace of life I really enjoyed.
Yeah, it was lovely.
My wife and I, we always have Friday night film nights. We always got a really nice takeaway. This was when all the local pubs were cooking really nice meals, but you could just take them home with you, which was the ideal. Get a bottle of wine, have a film you're really looking forward to. That became a big thing. Now we've turned that into family film nights, but just that kind of regime and structure to life, I think, is a really good thing. And I think we've lost touch with that. And that's one of my main pushbacks with social media, with kind of omnipresent devices, with this always on pace, is if you're not intentional, like it sounds like you're now being, Katy, Monday becomes Saturday, becomes Sunday, becomes Wednesday. Like especially if you're freelance, especially if you work for yourself.
Yeah.
I can be doing anything for a client 7 days a week in the same office. And I have to really tell myself, no, this is Saturday. This is a family day. This is not a work day.
Really hard.
And that takes and same as evening hours. No, this is a time to switch off for my own well-being.
Yeah.
But it sounds really encouraging. It sounds like you've learned a lot along the way.
I have, and actually during that time I got a creative coach as well, who she's been amazing. I expect she thinks she's hardly had to do anything, but she has really genuinely helped, because I've been going on a bit of a journey in the last couple of years where I've just shaken off so many things that were holding me back before, and all from just figuring things out through counseling. I mean, if anybody's watching this and thinking about getting a counselor, God, go and do it. It was amazing. And you open up when you stop dwelling on things in the past or beating yourself up for things or whatever it is that's going on in your life, in your head, because we all have them. Once you sort of like figure them out or forgive yourself or forgive others, it just opens up this huge space, and you're suddenly like, oh, and it's almost like having, the world taken off your shoulders, and you're like, oh, I've got all this time and energy now, and I can use it really positively. So yeah, okay, I've been dressing myself a different way. I've been doing my hair differently. I've I've been looking after myself. I've been focusing on fitness, eating really well, nurturing my close friends, looking after my family, all these really super positive things. And it feels like you're sort of a snowball that started at the top of the hill and you're just rolling down and gathering momentum. And it's glorious. I mean, my mum was right. She used to say to me, you just wait until you get to your 40s. It's bloody brilliant because you stop giving a shit about everybody else. I said, I'll believe it when I see it. And it is just amazing. I just wish we could feel like this at 21.
Yeah. No, I'm the same. I mean, I'm closing in on 40, and yeah, I mean, I feel like the last 2 years, and part of it's probably part and parcel with finally having the confidence to go out and set up my own business. And
right.
But I think people are finally seeing the me that's always been there, but the me that's always tried to slot into whatever environment as a bit of a chameleon wherever I've been. The me that didn't speak out of turn, that just did the job. People are now finally seeing the real one that was at home all the time. And I talk very openly about my love for 90s professional wrestling and Ghostbusters and all this kind of stuff, because actually these are real passion points for me. And
that's great.
I don't care actually, because they're things that bring me great joy, and it doesn't matter. And it doesn't affect, crucially, it doesn't affect my, it's irrelevant whether I've got Ghostbuster toys or I'm covered in tattoos. Like, it doesn't affect my ability to be a very professional, knowledgeable communicator with a huge amount of corporate experience. And I really think we hopefully are reaching quite a sweet spot, which hopefully the pandemic helped quite significantly, that it doesn't matter what the package is like on the outside, it's actually what you can do that matters. And with that, hopefully becomes a real, when we stop labeling people and we stop having everyone look and conform a certain way, that just unlocks so much creativity and innovation in our world.
I think it's a really complicated subject and probably deserves a longer chat elsewhere. But I think when us girls are brought up, there's a sort of sense that we're going to become a mother one day and we're going to do all these things. I never really wanted to do that. I decided when I was 6 that I didn't want children. So I guess there's all these kind of expectations that society puts on us and things that we put on ourselves from the kind of voices that we've heard over the years. And it's amazing, like, if you meditate and sit quietly, the voices that will seep in and you'll go, oh, that's interesting. Where's that voice come from? You're not good at this. You're not going to be able to do that. You should do this. You should do that. And I found that the last couple of years, I've managed to sort of shake those all off. And so what's quite sad about it is that I've realized that for most of my adult life, I have not really known who I am and not allowed myself to embrace who I am and fully enjoy and love who I am. So it's kind of, this is what I was sort of touching on before. I feel like I'm falling in love with myself, which sounds absurd, but I'm like, oh, I like that. And I'm going to sort of talk about that. I like that. And I'm going to wear that. And I'm going to do this. And I'm finding myself. I'm figuring out who is Katy Cowan rather than just a PR professional, somebody who runs Creative Boom. Because as you know, you end up kind of, you can almost disappear into it if you're not careful. There's also the element of, you don't want to be, too brash. You don't want to be the sort of loudest voice in the room. But you're in danger if you do that of tiptoeing around and always sort of, watering yourself down to fit in. I did a podcast with Katie Cadwell. It's called the NDA podcast. And it was talking about walking like a man. I thought, blimey, I never realized, but I have been doing that my whole life just to sort of make life easier for me, because there are barriers. And there are things that us women have to sort of deal with on a regular basis to be taken seriously and to be deemed as credible, which has been half the battle with Creative Boom, actually.
In what way?
Well, I guess when you're starting a blog, so I always say to a friend of mine who has just started a magazine and it's great. And so I'm really jealous of you because you have loads of industry experience behind you. You're a specialist in the field that you're going to be doing this in. And you can sort of sit down and say, this is the name of the magazine, this is the audience, this is what you're going to write about, and it's all just going to make sense. Whereas I started something really kind of like organic that didn't really know what it was 13 years ago, and I've had to spend the last 13 years turning it into something that can get to that level, and it's been really challenging. So I haven't got like, I didn't start
but that's the journey. And if you know,
yeah.
without you know, sounding too, I don't know, that is the journey. Like you wouldn't have the product I have the same with Second Mountain. I have the same with looking back at the 15 years it's taken to get here, and some of the sizable dips I've taken in my life.
I've figured that
to get
out
to this point. But yeah, you wouldn't have exactly what you've got now if you'd done it any other way. And
I've figured that out, and that's been part of the journey, and that's the exciting realization, because once you stop worrying about what kind of other people think and what their expectations are of you and all this kind of rubbish, and once you actually say to yourself, bloody hell, Katie, you've like survived 13 years from global economic crisis to pandemic, and you've kept going
back to global economic crisis.
Pardon?
Back to global economic crisis again.
Yes,
full circle.
Yeah. Oh shit. Yeah, we're all not looking forward to that next year, are we? But yeah, so I think it's just kind of getting over yourself, getting over your insecurities, and being proud of what you've built, and really leaning into your strengths, and actually recognizing that, yeah, okay, so that thing over there might be better than you. They might be a bigger PR agency. They might have amazing big clients. But what have you got? What's your niche? What makes you special that they can never emulate? They can never be you. So I'm on a journey at the moment. It's a very kind of passionate journey of finding out what is me. It's always been there, and you can see it on Creative Boom. You can see it in my tweets. You can see my personality, I suppose, and get an idea of who I am. But I'm figuring that out still. And that is the joy. That is the kind of, that's where my head's at currently. And weirdly, Creative Boom is on a sort of similar trajectory. And its success over the last couple of years is because I've allowed myself to just focus purely on the platform and embrace what makes it unique and special, and realize that actually there's something really good here, and we can carry on improving it. I'm just going to enjoy the process. I'm not going to obsess about whether it's good enough or whether we're doing enough. I'm going to say, do you know what? We're doing really, really well.
What's been the highlight for you?
What, from Creative Boom?
Or some of the highlights?
Yeah, it's really tough, because it's definitely been, a kind of labor of love. So I think overall I'm very proud of it. I think the thing I've loved the most is just getting out and meeting people. It's always been this nice thing to say that you do. It's like, when people say, oh, what, especially in London, oh, what do you do? And you say to them, oh, I work in PR, and their eyes glaze over, and you see their sort of, but I also do this. And it's so, that's what I think I'm, most proud of, the highlights, just being able to sort of network and meet some really interesting people, and be of value to the creative industry, really, I hope. Well, I know, I got an email this morning from somebody who said, thank you so much for that feature you wrote about me the other day. It resulted in a new client. And I get stuff like that all the time. So yeah, that's the thing I'm most proud of. It's making a difference. It's helping people. And I get to sort of go out and talk to the most interesting folk and help to understand where the creative industry is at, and how we can carry on supporting them. So,
and as part of that, you're now closing on about 100 episodes of the Creative Boom podcast. What led to starting a podcast, and how's that been for you?
Well, that kind of also ties in with the start of this journey of finding myself and building confidence and figuring out what Creative Boom is and how it can add value. I started off my career in broadcast journalism, running around Birmingham and Stoke-on-Trent with a microphone, covering all sorts of stories. And I did that for a while and went into PR because the money was better, basically. And it was more creative. There's only so many times you can cover story about, the cricket, or it gets a bit
Yeah.
repetitive and boring. So I don't know, when podcasts started getting popular, it was always something, I had a chat with during the evening with Tom. I should do a podcast. I think I'll be good at it. I'll do a podcast. But it's just finding the time, and, the technology had changed so much since 2004 was when I left broadcast journalism. So I just got going, and it was at the end of 2019. So it was, good time, felt positive. 2020 was looking good. Let's get something recorded.
2020 sounded really exciting, didn't it? So like a really positive number and year.
Oh yeah, definitely. It was going to be great. I'd just been to California. I'd done a really amazing camping trip with a friend over there called Kiffany. I'd seen the Big Sur at long last, and gone to the beautiful Yosemite National Park. Didn't see any bears, but there you go. I've been told that's a good thing. And yeah, so I just started it, and I thought, well, what can go wrong? And my very first guest was Malcolm Garrett, and he was just a gentleman. And I remember balancing the two microphones on a stool in an old sort of cinema, because it was a really good soundproof room. And he was just great. I kind of just dropped on something. I thought, oh, I think I'm quite enjoying this. So it just went from there. But then the lockdown happened and everything, and it was like, oh no, I was going to do all this in person, because I was a bit of a perfectionist at the time. I was going to get the best value, best quality audio. It was going to all be in person, because in-person interactions are far superior to doing anything online, and I haven't got a clue what I'm doing online. This was pre-Zoom and Squadcast and all the rest of it. And then it happened. So I just kind of had a bit of a confidence crash, and I thought, God, how am I going to carry on doing this now? So like anyone, we just scrambled to figure out what to use next, and we just figured it out. And it was very raw and exciting and very positive. And I'd never done podcasting before, so I hadn't got a clue what I was doing. And I hope that anybody who listens to it on a regular basis has bared with me, because I'd like to think that it's got to a stage now where it's, nicely polished and has got a nice format. But yeah, it was not like doing something like where you're on your honeymoon and you say, oh, I'm going to do a blog, where it felt, this was before you had no one following you, no one knew about you. So it was like, oh, great. And also you're in your sort of 20s. So, you don't think about risks. You don't think about what could go wrong. You're just like, oh, great, I'm just going to do a blog. It'll be brilliant. Let's just do it. It was like, oh, I've got up to 1 million people going on Creative Boom a month, and I'm going to do a podcast, and I'm going to be the host. Shit. No pressure. So I think actually in the end, the pandemic, that was the silver lining, because I think people were a bit more patient and gave you a bit more artistic license to mess up and develop your style and figure things out and all the rest of it. So
I think the pandemic was a bit of a leveler in terms of recognizing that there's beauty in imperfection.
Yeah, definitely.
And actually, I think, when we started to see A-listers scrabbling around in their homes like the rest of us, living in chaos, and with shoddy kind of tech setups, trying to do interviews and things, you realized actually we're all just learning with this technology. Exactly. But I've loved listening to the journey of how the podcast has developed. Are there any episodes you obviously have interviewed a lot of people over these last almost 100 episodes? Are there any that really stand out to you? Or if someone wants to kind of dip their toes into the Creative Boom podcast waters, is there any that you'd introduce someone to?
Oh my gosh, there's so many. I'd have to bring it all up. There's been like we're nearly up to 100. I'd say John Bergerman was a nice one, because that was actually in New York. I'd taken a cab. My God, it was expensive. Taken a cab across Manhattan to the depths of Brooklyn to go into John Bergerman's glorious studio and interview this kind of, I hope he doesn't mind me saying this, quite introverted, shy character surrounded by all his kind of wacky paintings and characters. That was lovely. And then on the same day, I then got a cab down to another chap called Zipong Zhu, He's a sort of graphic designer in New York. What a character. Basically went into his apartment and it was chaotic and we were surrounded by penises. And
Okay.
it was, I think, 11 in the morning, and he just got out a bottle of rosé. And his boyfriend was there, and there was an assistant of his helping out, working on a laptop in the corner. It was just crazy and really good fun. And he's so funny in that episode. So those are sort of memorable, I suppose, to me because of where I was, and that was recorded in February 2020.
Right.
I was going on a trip over there to see the launch of a new product by Wix called Editor X, which is fantastic. And my husband Tommy said to me just before I go, because he's very kind of on it with the news and data and really likes to read all these obscure kind of publications, he's really on it. In fact, it was my husband Tom that got all of our family to lock down 2 weeks before Boris told us to. So we all locked down before, because he basically rang everyone and said, look, you need to lock down or whatever. We said, you sure you want to go to New York? There's this thing going around. They're starting to build mass graves in China. And I was like, oh yeah, fine. Go New York. It'll be fine. Oh, little did we know. So those are meaningful to me, but I don't know. There's so many good ones. I really love the one with Morag Myerscough, because we recorded it once and it messed up. And she was so brutally honest with me. She said, this felt a bit flat, didn't it? We weren't both in the right mood. Should we just do it again? And I was like, yeah, all right. And so because we'd got to know each other a bit and all the rest of it, I got a really good conversation out of her. And then I would also recommend Vanessa Scott. She's a local Manchester artist, great fun, brilliant laugh, brilliant smile, just really passionate about what she does. And she's very, very caring and does so much for the, does lots of stuff with charities and things. So her and her sister run something that basically they go into, I think they go into prisons and they sort of teach people in there new skills with art, and also teach them sort of things as well. God, going off on one, but yeah.
No, I think that, I mean, it's kind of indicative of how vast and incredible the creative industry is, isn't it? And all these characters and all these stories, and that's what I'm already loving about being on this journey. With this show, you've obviously had the same. I think podcasts are just such a beautiful medium.
Yeah.
In all their rawness, in all their kind of slightly chaotic conversational flow, the areas you can go, because this is life, isn't it? You can have a plan, but conversations will go in every single direction, and that's what makes being a human being so wonderful. I've loved it, and it's been wonderful to have this chance to spend so much time with you today, and to kind of get under the bonnet of Creative Beam a bit more, really. I mean, one thing I wanted to ask before we wrap up is, obviously it's an evolving, tamed beast, but it keeps changing. Do you have any idea or dreams for maybe what Creative Beam looks like in 5 years' time? Or is that too hard to predict?
Oh no, we're working to a 5-year plan, definitely. One of the great things about working on something full-time is that you can dedicate all of your time and energy to it. I mean, the plan is to just continue growing the platform as a credible magazine. We've done huge steps over the last couple of years to make that happen. We're now IPSO accredited, which means we're sort of holding ourselves to the highest standards of journalism. And we have, complaints procedures in place. We have really good writers, qualified journalists, that's growing. I mean, it's 13 years old, but I kind of see it as 2 years old since I sort of went full time on it. So I can't tell you what it's going to look like in 5 years, given everything I've learned thus far, in that it is constantly going to change, and there's always going to be new challenges, and the industry will change. But I do know that I want, I'd love to have an office space again, go back to sort of having all of the team somewhere, even though the world has changed and talent's spread out. So that might not necessarily happen. yeah, just to sort of carry on running something that's of value to the creative community and allows me to grow and develop my own kind of skills. If it gets to a point where that's not happening anymore, or I fancy something else, then sure, I'll probably work to sell it, hand the gauntlet over to somebody else. But I suppose the big question is, am I sort of a separate thing from Creative Boom? Can Creative Boom ever be something that I give up? That's probably the big question I'll need to ask in 5 years' time, when, Ben, I will be nearly 50. Oh my God.
Where life begins, isn't it? That's what I've heard. That's what I'm hanging on to.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there's a lot to be hopeful about. As long as I am always doing something I love and I'm doing something meaningful, then, in 5 years' time, yeah, I can imagine myself still running this thing and evolving it. But who knows, I might go and start something else.
Yeah. Well, that's all any of us can aim for, isn't it? But I mean, I personally, have a lot of admiration for you. I think just thank you for all you've done for the creative sector. Really, I think you've given a voice, not necessarily given a voice to a voiceless, but certainly given a voice to some, the little guys, the guys that aren't in big, London or New York headland, the guys that are just trying to do carve their own paths. And I think that's such a powerful thing. How can anyone listening today keep in touch with you? What are your socials?
Oh, very easy. So on Twitter, personally, I won't follow you back, as you now know, but I'm Katy L. Cowan on Twitter. You can find me on LinkedIn very easily, Katy Cowan, just type my name in. And that's kind of it with personal social media. But for Creative Boom, it's all Creative Boom, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, LinkedIn, Matrodon.
Are you on there now? The new one?
Yeah, I've kind of got the username and I'm trying it out and seeing what happens. But I don't know. It's one of those things you just don't know whether these things are going to take off. But yeah, really easily found. And the website is creativeboom.com.
Brilliant. Well, I can't recommend it enough to everyone. Whether you're in the creative industries or if you're not, but you just want to have a burst of what's out there and just read some great journalism and see some beautiful artwork, then, take 5 minutes, brew a cup of tea, sit down and enjoy the Creative Boom website and the Creative Boom podcast as well. But that brings us to a close today. Thank you so much for your time and your honesty, Katy, and for being a guest on the show. It's been wonderful to have you here.
Been really fun.
Thank you. Any final thoughts?
Final thoughts. Well, in terms of advice to others, just don't be afraid to be yourself and just enjoy getting to know who you are, what your passions are, and don't ever give up. Persevere, because hard work and keeping going is the kind of key to getting where you want to be.
And what about for freelancers? You've probably spent a lot of time speaking with freelancers and kind of independent operators. What are some of the kind of traits that you've seen in the people you've interviewed over the years that you think makes for a good freelancer if someone's thinking of maybe taking the plunge and leaving behind safe employment? Definitely
resilience. Not being afraid to sort of put the hours in initially. The first couple of years, I'm not going to lie, they're going to be difficult. You're going to have to work extra hard whilst you build up a network. And also just understand that business is about people. Never burn any bridges, always keep doors open, give back more than you take. Don't ever get in touch with somebody and ask them for something and then not thank them afterwards if they've helped you out. Build bridges, understand that this is all about people. That's all it is. Business is about people, and just keep enjoying what you do. And you know what? Freelancing isn't for everyone. If you find yourself really struggling, you've tried it out, don't be disappointed with yourself that you are going to go back into full-time employment. Be proud of yourself that you took a gamble and tried something out, because this is what people focus too much on sometimes. They focus too much on the negative. actually flip your mindset on everything and say, actually, what did I get out of this? And be damn proud of yourself that you did it, because not many people do. So yeah, that's what I'd say. Have courage.
Absolutely. I feel like you've got a book in you, just waiting to come out.
Well, maybe one day.
One day. Well,
Yeah.
thank you for being such an inspiration and a great guest today. So that wraps us up today. My guest has been Katy Cowan, the founding editor of Creative Beam. I've been your host, Ben Veal, the founder of Second Mountain Comms, helping good people do good. If you've liked our show today, which hopefully you have, it'd be great if you give us a rating on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And don't forget to let us know what you think on all of our socials using the hashtag GoodJourneysPod. So thanks for joining Katy and I today. This has been the Good Journeys with Second Mountain podcast. So until next time, let's keep climbing together, and I'll see you all again soon.